Hi guys, welcome to CADS 3853 module number 22. In this module, we're going to start learning about a new aspect of merchandise planning, which is merchandise assortment planning. When a customer comes in a store, the store can provide two different stock situations. One is the in-stock situation where what the customer looks for is actually in the store. And the other is the situation where what the customer looks for is out of stock. And customers can make three different types of decisions in both in-stock or out-of-stock situations. They could either make purchases at that point of time, so that would turn into current sales for the retailers, or the customer may postpone their purchase and continue to browse in the store as well as in another store, which is basically called potential sales for retailers, because this customer can come back and make the purchases later, or they may not. So it's a potential sales. The last case of the customer decision will be a lost sales for the retailer, because the customers will go to different stores or they quit shopping and they just go home. And either way, the sales are lost. So the goal of the merchandise assortment plan is basically to avoid those lost sales and to convert potential sales into current sales, so that the retailer can produce as much current sales as possible. So the assortment planning is defined as the process of establishing the selection of merchandise available for a store during a particular planning period, which is usually a season. The goal of assortment planning is to create a balanced assortment. By balanced assortment, we mean that the assortment should meet the customer's needs, the target customer's needs, and contribute to the store's image. The store may have an image that is more friendly and economical, then the assortment has to fit that image. If the store has a luxurious, prestige kind of image, then the assortment again has to fit that type of image. So depending on the store image, you will have to choose different assortment. Also, balanced assortment means that the assortment will be efficient enough to accomplish the firm's financial goals. So by being efficient, we mean that the assortment will require minimum inventory investment, so the least amount of money that can be spent to produce the maximum impact on the bottom line, so to create the most sales and gross margin and profit and etc. When setting up assortment planning, there have been a couple of dimensions that have traditionally been considered by buyers or line managers. Those are the depth and width or breadth of the merchandise assortment. The assortment depth addresses the quantity aspect of the assortment. So the deep assortment basically means that you have many units of each SKU. So that means you are carrying multiple units for the same thing. So chances are you're going to have less out of stock situation, because even if many customers buy the same thing, you will still have some left for the same thing. Whereas if your assortment is shallow, that means you're carrying only a few units of each SKU. So when you have multiple customers who want exactly the same SKU, the same style, the same color, same size, you may not be able to accommodate all of them. Usually, like discount stores, could probably carry a lot of units for the same SKU. They deal with a lot lower priced items and inexpensive items, so you expect that multiple customers will purchase the same things, so you need to carry many units. Whereas department store or more prestigious luxury brand stores and places like that, when they're more above the market price range, there are less people who can afford those merchandise items, and for that matter, you don't expect that you're going to be able to sell a whole lot of units, so you're going to carry less units, few units for each SKU, so that makes the assortment more shallow. On the other hand, the breadth of the assortment or the assortment width basically deals with the variety of kinds of merchandise you're carrying in the store. So a broad assortment basically means you have many styles, sizes, colors, and things like that. So you can have a lot of different selections of a variety of selections of merchandise. Whereas a narrow assortment means you are dealing with fewer styles, colors, and sizes and things like that. So you're more focusing on those focused styles and colors or sizes rather than going for a variety. And if we go back to the kind of discussion of department store versus discount store, chances are the department stores are going to deal with more broad assortments. So you're carrying a lot of different styles, colors, and things like that. Whereas a discount store will deal with narrow or assortment, fewer styles and colors, and etc. If traditionally the depth and the breadth were the kind of main dimensions of the assortment planning, in recent years, the buyers and product line managers think about more dimensions, different kinds of dimensions than just the depth and width of the assortment. So we'll talk about just different dimensions that are newly added in the consideration of the assortment planning these days. Let's start with assortment factors. So we have to determine what product characteristics we are going to actually use to plan the assortment. We may use the style as one of the assortment factor. That means we're actually planning what styles we're going to carry. We will probably use size and color and brands. It could be etc. Different kinds of things, the factors, different the assortment of product characteristics that we want to use as the assortment factors and consider the assortment planning based on these different kind of factors. The next assortment dimension that we need to consider is SKU. I kind of mentioned this term on the previous slide already. SKU basically means stock keeping unit, which is a specific, unique combination of all the assortment factors that you're considering for your assortment planning. So for example, if you decided to go with a style, size, color, and brand as your assortment factors, then you are determining how many styles, how many colors, how many sizes, and how many brands you're going to carry. And a unique combination of a level from each of these assortment factors will constitute a SKU. So for example, a SKU may be like a style number 1, in size number 2, in color number 3, in brand number 4. Could be style number 1, in size number 3, in the color number 5, in brand number 2, something like that. So all for each of the assortment factors, you're going to have a different number of selections, right? So how many styles, how many sizes, how many colors, and how many brands. The combination of all those potential possible combination of the assortment factor levels selections will constitute the number of SKUs you're going to carry in your store. So that determines the assortment variety, right? So in total, how many SKUs you carry in your assortment, and that determines what is the level of variety that your assortment has. So the more SKUs you have, the greater the assortment variety. The other term or assortment dimension that we need to learn is assortment volume. Okay, the assortment volume is the total number of units or total number of pieces that you carry in your assortment. So the higher the volume, the higher the number of units. So given knowing all the assortment factors, the meaning of assortment factors and SKU, assortment variety, and assortment volume now, let's kind of take a look at the specific meanings or specific examples of these assortment dimensions, as well as how we are actually figuring out and calculating and planning all these kind of things. So let's take a look at the assortment factors first. If you're a buyer for men's jeans, then what assortment factors would you like to use to plan the men's jeans assortment? So you may plan your assortment based on the colors, styles, and brands. Also in terms of size, right? The size for size, you may have to consider two different sizes for men's jeans because men's pants items, jeans or other pants usually come with two different sizes, including the waist size as well as the length. The pants length, that's the size, right? So you will have to have a plan about how many styles, colors, brands, and waist sizes and lengths you're going to carry in your jean assortment, as well as what are those colors, styles, brands, and sizes and lengths are actually. What if you were a woman's pantyhose buyer? What kind of assortment factors would you consider? Let me give you a few seconds to kind of think about it. Like I kind of came up with this example of some vectors like style. So it could be like plain or it could be like fishnet, it could be different kinds of things, right? And colors, so you can have different variety of colors of pantyhose. And size, very important external factor would be the size, right? And also the density or the thickness or how sheer or thick the texture of the pantyhose is. Could be also another assortment factor, right? And if you want to carry multiple brands for the same style, color and size, you also need to consider brand as an assortment factor. So, these are some example assortment factors that you may have to deal with as a woman's pantyhose buyer. What about bath towels? Let's say you are a buyer for bath towels in a general merchandise store such as like Walmart or Target and places like that. Now, what assortment factors would you consider? The color could be an important assortment factor for planning bath towel assortment. The size matters, right? The bath towel versus a face towel versus like hand towel, they are not going to be replaceable, interchangeable. So you need to have an idea about which of these sizes you're going to carry and how many of each size and things like that. The design factor, right? The color, the towel is going to be plain or it's going to have some kind of texture or is it going to have some kind of patterns, all those kind of things. Price and fiber, those things may determine the quality of the bath towels. And if you want to have a layer of different qualities of bath towels, then you probably need to consider price or fiber or both as the certain factors. All these things are just examples, certain factors, and if you actually work as a buyer for each of these different item classification, you may end up dealing with more than these the examples and factors that we're sharing here. But these are kind of things that to think about. So now let's think about the SKU, right? Let's say a buyer decides to only consider two assortment factors, color and size. And he or she decided that two colors and three sizes are going to be used for the planning of the assortment, right? So colors being the black and white, and size in terms of size, small, medium, large are planned. If that's the case, then how many SKUs does this buyer plan? You have two colors and three sizes, and I said SKUs are unique combinations, right? Unique combinations of all the assortment factors. So for color, you have two levels, black or white. For the size, you have three levels for the small, medium, large. So that means you're going to actually have 6 SKUs, 2 by 3, 6 SKUs. So SKU number 1 could be small black, SKU number 2 could be medium black, and SKU number 3 is large black, and SKU number 4 can be all white small. SKU number 5 is white medium. SKU number 6 could be white large, etc. Right? So this is the case where you have only two assortment factors, and each comes in just 2 and 3 levels. But what about like if you have another assortment factor? So you have 3 assortment factors. So let's say that's a style. So that means you're carrying these colors and sizes, but you're going to also carry 3 different styles. Then for each of these SKUs, you have to also have the 3 different styles. They all come in 3 different styles. So that makes the SKU tripled. The number of SKUs tripled, right? So then in that case, it would be actually 6 times 3 is 18 SKUs actually exist. So that leads us to the example of the assortment variety calculation. As I just said, SKUs are the unique combination of all the assortment factors, and assortment variety is the total number of SKUs, right? So let's assume that we are planning an assortment of pants that has 6 different styles and 12 colors per style, and they come in 9 sizes. If that's the case, then what would be the assortment variety? So another way, what would be the total number of SKUs? What? So let's think about it together, right? So total number of SKUs or the variety will be a combination of all these 3 assortment factors, styles, colors, and sizes. So that would make it the number of styles times number of colors times number of sizes, right? So 6 times 12 times 9 equals 648, and that is the total number of SKUs this buyer is planning for this assortment of pants. So let's continue with this previous example. What would happen to the variety of the assortment if you decide to carry each of the 9 sizes in 3 lengths? So we already calculated the number of SKUs based on the number of styles, colors, and sizes. But what if that you decided that you're going to also have add the pant length as the assortment factor, and in terms of pant length, you're going to carry 3 different lengths. Okay, that's the case. Then what would be the variety? What would be the total number of SKUs? Okay, let's pause the video here and calculate the variety. Right, so now not only the number of styles, colors, sizes, but you have to also consider the number of lengths in the calculation of the total SKUs, number of SKUs. So that would be 6 times 12 times 9 times, finally, times 3. So that makes the number of SKUs tripled as compared to the previous example, right? So 1944 SKUs will now have to be carried. So adding one assortment factor is a very important decision to make because it has a significant impact on the variety of merchandise you're carrying, and that means that you need to have the space in the store to be able to present all these different SKUs. And if in your warehouse, logistically in warehouse, the same way you have to prepare the space to handle these different the SKUs, right? So for a buyer, determining the assortment factors and determining the levels of each of the assortment factors is a very important task. So far we took a look at some examples of the assortment factors for different item classifications, and how to what the concept of a SKU is, and how to calculate assortment variety. Now the last assortment dimension that we are considering is assortment volume. Okay, there are 2 different ways to calculate assortment volumes, and in fact, in the industry, buyers usually use both ways to calculate the assortment volume and compare them to make a final decision about their appropriate assortment volume. The first calculation, the way to calculate assortment volume is a top-down calculation. Top-down basically means you start with a big number, right? So you usually start with the total open to buy retail at retail or open to buy at cost. The total open to buy budget, so you know how much a purchase you can actually make. And then you obtain an information about the average retail price, ARP, of in that item classification. And based on those 2 numbers, you can calculate the assortment volume. You can plan the assortment volume, right? So since the assortment volume is total number of units, usually you plan the assortment volume by dividing the total open to buy amount by the average retail price. So by doing that, you can come up with how many units you need to carry if the total budget is X amount, and the average retail price is X dollar, Y dollars, then what would be the number of units that you can carry? So in the given example, the total open to buy at retail is $250,000. So we can spend this much to buy the assortment, and average retail price is $25. Then total, what would be the total number of units that we need to carry in this assortment? So the volume. Let's pause the video and do the calculation. That's right. So open to buy is $250,000 and average retail price is $25. So that would be 10,000 units that we can carry in our assortment. Continuing the discussion of the top-down calculation of the assortment volume, let's say we're using the same information from the previous example. Then let's think about how the volume would change if we change the AERP, the average retail price. So for example, in the previous problem, the AERP that we used was $25. But let's say because of the inflation, which caused the merchandise cost to raise, you feel the need to increase your ARP, the average retail price, in your store. So let's say that now the new ARP is $27.5. If that's the case, then what will be the volume? How many total number of units can we actually plan? Okay, we're using the same concept of total open to buy dollar in the entire budget divided by the ARP in here. Okay, let's pause the video and do the calculation. So we're going to have to divide the total open to buy of $250,000 by the new ARP, which is 27.5. That will give us the volume of 9,091 units. So with the increase of the ARP, we had to reduce the volume, right? Because our budget, the open to buy, is limited and it stays the same. And our ARP goes up. That means we cannot carry as many units anymore. On the other hand, the assortment volume can also be planned using the bottom-up calculation. So it kind of starts from the bottom, which is like looking at each SKU or each style, each size, each color, whatever the level of assortment factors that you're planning on. Think about those levels, and for each of those levels, how many you can actually sell, right? Given your knowledge of your store and your customers, how many do you think you're going to be able to sell? And if you do have that kind of plan, then you can now plan the total number of units, the total volume of the store from a bottom-up kind of approach. So for example, let's assume that you plan to sell like 500 units, each of the 3 different styles of like pants or something like that you have. Then how would you calculate the volume, the total number of units? So that would be the number of units per style, in this case, because we know the styles, right? Times the number of styles. So 500 units per style, and we have 3 styles, so that will make the volume of 1,500 units. All right, so let's continue to work on another example problem for the bottom-up approach. Here in this problem, let's assume that we're planning to sell 10 units for each of the 500 SKUs that we plan to have. So we figure that we need 500 SKUs in the store, and on average, we probably will sell around 10 units. Okay, in that case, what would be the volume, the total number of units? Right, again, we can calculate the total number of units or volume by multiplying the number of units per SKU times the number of SKUs, right? So 10 units per SKU times 500 SKUs, so that will lead us to have the volume of 5,000 units in the store. And like I said earlier, the buyer usually uses both the bottom-up approach we just talked about and the top-down approach that we talked about earlier, and try to see if they give matched answers, the same or very similar assortment volume. And if not, then the buyer will have to try to adjust the volume in either way using the top-down or bottom-up approach by changing the open-to-buy dollar or the ARP dollar, or replan the number of units you can sell per SKU or per style, things like that, so that eventually the buyer will reach a conclusion that is satisfactory and that can be doable, and that gives enough sales and enough open-to-buy and all of those things. Quantifying an assortment in the way that we have just learned helps to relate the assortment to the productivity measures, such as assortment diversity. Assortment diversity can be calculated based on the assortment volume and assortment variety that we already learned how to calculate. Basically, the concept of assortment diversity is the average volume per SKU, or we call it VSA, volume per SKU in the assortment. Just abbreviate it as a VSA. And we know that volume is number of units, right? So the volume per SKU basically means the number of units per SKU, right? And the assortment diversity represent the diversity or the focus of the assortment. So how diverse the assortment is versus how focused the assortment is. So the formula for volume per SKU in the assortment, or VSA, okay, is the number of total units divided by the number of SKUs, because the VSA is the average volume per SKU, right? So you have to have the volume in the denominator and the variety or the SKU number of SKUs in the numerator for you to be able to come up with the average volume or average number of units per SKU. All right, so let's work on an example problem to calculate the assortment diversity, or VSA. Okay. Assuming that you are planning an assortment with the assortment volume of 2,500 units and the assortment variety of 200 SKUs. Okay, when your planned volume is 2,500 units and variety is 200 SKUs, then what would be your VSA, the average volume per SKU in your assortment? Right, the VSA is the assortment volume divided by assortment variety. So 2,500 divided by 1,200, that will be 12.5. Okay, the meaning of the VSA is the average volume per SKU. So this 12.5 of VSA basically means that you can carry on average 12.5 units per SKU. All right, so now let's say we have an assortment that uses the same assortment volume as the previous problem, so 2,500 units, but the variety in this time has changed to 1,250 SKUs. So we're dealing with a lot more SKUs. That means probably you added more styles or colors, sizes, brands, whatever the assortment factor levels that you added, so that you're carrying more variety of merchandise here. Okay. If that's the case, when the variety increases, then what's going to happen to the assortment diversity, the VSA, the average volume per SKU? Let's do the calculation. Right, so the VSA has reduced now, right? Because your volume stays the same, but since your variety increased, per SKU, you're going to have to buy less units, right? So now 2,500, the volume divided by 1,250, which is the variety. Now it gives me 2. So that means on average you can have only 2 units per SKU. So the assortment diversity can be used to assess the diversity versus the focus level of the assortment by comparing with this assortment diversity index. Usually, we consider the VSA of 0 to 2 as very diverse assortment, and between 2 and 5 will be diverse assortment, and between 5 and 10 is transition between the diverse and focused assortment. Whereas if it is over 10, all the way through 20, that will be focused, and if it's over the VSA is over 20 to 50, that will be very focused. And if it's beyond 50, that means you're carrying more than 50 units per SKU. In that case, we call it unaffected. Basically, what that unaffected means is that, and since you carry so many units per SKU, it's very unlikely that you're going to be in an out of stock situation. And so the assortment is really unaffected by the sales. In this case, I mean the assortment situation, whether it's in stock or out of stock situation, it's not really affected by the sales too much, because it's going to probably be mostly in stock almost all the time. So given this assortment diversity index, let's use it to assess the assortment that we had calculated earlier. So first calculation of the VSA was 12.5, the second one was 2, right? So VSA of 12.5 is considered what? If it's diverse or focused or very diverse, very focused, which category does it fit? Okay. So the VSA of 12.5 will be focused, right? Because I said between 10 and 20 will be a focused assortment. Whereas the VSA of 2 will be between 0 and 2 is called very diverse assortment, right? That means usually it means you're going broad, going for a broad and shallow kind of assortment, okay? Whereas the focus could mean that you are narrow, so you're not going to carry a whole lot of different kind of variety, but you're going deep, you're carrying a lot of units per the SKU. Alright, so let's practice all of the assortment dimensions that we have learned so far all together in this one problem, okay? So let's say we're working with this information for planning our assortment. So we're going to carry 8 styles and 6 colors per style, and each color will come in 6 sizes. Okay, and the average retail price that we are planning is around $15, and then the total open to buy at retail, the budget is $12,000. Okay. If this is the data that we're working with to plan our assortment, then what will be the assortment volume? Okay, how much will be the assortment variety? And based on those two, what will be the VSA? And given the VSA, which in category can we put this assortment in terms of the assortment diversity index? Let's pause the video here and work on all of the problems. Alright, so the volume, we're using the top-down approach of calculating assortment volume, right? So we start with the open to buy at retail $12,000 and divide that by our average retail price of $15. That gives us the 800 units as the volume. The variety number of SKUs, we have to know how many levels of styles, colors, and sizes we're going to carry, and 8 styles times 6 colors times 6 sizes, which give us 288 SKUs for our variety. The VSA is assortment volume divided by variety, so 800 divided by 288, which is 2.78. The volume, 2.78 units per SKU on average we're going to carry. Okay, if this is the VSA, then what would be the assortment diversity index category that this assortment represents? That will be, again, diverse, right? If it is the VSA is between 2 and 5, that will be considered diverse assortment. Then let's continue to think about the last assortment that we just calculated. What if we wanted to keep the same volume, so it's the same number of units, but increase the VSA to 8? We figured that the VSA of 2.7 is just too low, and we should be able to sell at least, on average, 8 units per SKU. So, but we don't want to change the total number of units, the volume of the store, because we can carry only so many units. Okay, then if this is the case, then what do we need to change, okay, in our plan, and what does it have to change to for the VSA to be 8 while the volume stays the same? Okay, let's think about it. Since the VSA is volume divided by variety, and we want to maintain the same volume, that means for us to change the VSA, we have to change the variety, right? So the volume of this assortment was 800 units, which was calculated in the previous example, previous problem. So we're maintaining the same 800 units, but the variety has to change and so to a certain number for the VSA to be 8. Okay, so the 8 equals 800 units divided by the variety, and the variety being the x that we're trying to find out, right? So the variety will be 800 divided by 8, right? So that will be 100. Okay, of course the variety is the number of SKUs, so that this means 100 SKUs. Okay, so overall, for us to increase the VSA to 8 from 2.7, which we calculated earlier, we need to reduce the variety from originally we had 288 SKUs in the previous slide, and now but it has to reduce to 100 SKUs for us to be able to afford to increase the VSA to 8. This type of conversion is very important because you don't just calculate the VSA and just stop there, but you have to assess whether that VSA gives enough number of units per SKU to sell, right? And if you don't feel that you have enough, then you have to adjust either volume or variety to be able to reach the right amount of the VSA. It's the same when you feel like your VSA is too high. If you don't think you can sell that many units per SKU, then again you will have to either reduce the volume or increase the variety, so your VSA will reduce, right? So the organic relationships among the volume and variety and the VSA of your assortment have to be completely understood. Generally speaking, as the VSA increases, gross margin percent also increases. This is because when you have a high VSA, that means you have enough number of units per SKU in your assortment, and that reduces the possibility to have a stock out situations. That means you are more likely to have things the customers like, and because of that your sales will go up, and that leads to a higher gross margin percent. A low VSA may appear to be a merchandise shortage, and you may feel like, okay, I don't have enough units per SKU, when it is in fact the overage in slow selling merchandise, which means you just have a lot of different variety of styles and colors and sizes, but they are all either broken in colors and sizes, or they are just not really favored styles by your customers, so that like 1 unit or 2 units are just left in the store for a long time per SKU, and they are not getting sold. And because of that, when you calculate your current VSA, it comes that you have a high variety, so many things are there, but in a low quantity. So those lingering slow sellers are just causing the low VSA. So it does not actually mean you are short in your merchandise, but that you probably have the wrong kind of merchandise sitting around there and not selling for a long time, and a variety of them are existing in your store. There's no one ideal VSA, but different store types can produce different VSAs. So, for example, specialty stores, they usually have lower VSAs. A lot of the specialty stores may actually have a VSA of less than 2, for example. So that basically means that they're going to carry only 1 or 2 units per SKU, per style, color, size. Whereas the discount stores usually go with a deep assortment, which means they're going to carry a lot of units per SKU, right? So the VSA will be then tend to be higher, definitely above 3. So that means you are carrying 3 or more units per SKU. Why do we need to plan merchandise assortments? That's because a merchandise assortment drives customers to decide whether or not to shop in your store, and whether the items that they are looking for are in stock or out of stock have direct influence on their purchase decisions, basically, which lead to the impact on your sales, gross margin, and profit. Therefore, working on assortment planning in advance helps to minimize the out-of-stock situation and maximize the in-stock situations, directly improving the customer shopping experience, which should lead to higher sales and gross margin and things like that. When we do plan the assortment, we have to use measurable assortment dimensions such as assortment factor planning, or the assortment variety planning, assortment volume planning, and the diversity index planning, and etc., so that we can control our assortment planning process in a reasonable way. Through the diversity index, we can kind of see our assortment's productivity, whether it's very diverse or very focused or somewhere in between, it is more appropriate range and things like that. So the diversity index is a kind of a tool to help us assess the potential productivity of our assortment during the planning process. So this concludes module number 22. In this module, we talked about the merchandise assortment plans, especially focusing on different assortment dimensions that we need to use to plan our assortment. In next module, we are going to go into more specifics of actually planning the assortment of a product line. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to work on the module problem assignment number 22 based on this module. Bye-bye.